Isaac Abrams was born and raised in New York City. He is a self-taught artist who started painting in 1965. Based in upstate New York, he continues to paint every day. He first discovered psychedelics in 1962. He then discovered psychedelics again and again. He decided there had to be such a thing as psychedelic art, and founded the Coda Gallery, the first gallery of psychedelic art in New York City in 1965. He had his first one-man show in 1968 at Gallery Psychotherapie in Zurich, and he has other memorable moments include climbing a tree with Timothy Leary to discuss business, meeting Salvador Dali, shooting a film at Mickey Hart's Ranch in 1971 featuring Jerry Garcia and the New Writers of the Purple Sage, Reality One Group, and David Crosby. He has worked across several mediums, from oil to acrylic sculpture, from animation to brushes to airbrushes, canvas to board, glass, and bronze. Isaac, welcome to the Brain Forest Cafe. We're delighted to have you.
Well, I'm delighted to be here.
Your biography that I have for you is very brief, and it doesn't really do you justice. You've had many encounters over the years with major figures in the psychedelic world, and I've been reading some of this background information you kindly provided. But rather than try to interrogate you in some linear fashion, just tell me what your life has been. You've hung out with amazing people, in the early '60s, and when all this psychedelic revolution was just beginning. So Timothy Leary and Alpert and Howard Lotsof and all those things. Tell me about your encounters with some people.
Well, I'll start with the first person who ever turned me on to a psychedelic. His name was
That's like a good place.
Jerry. Yes, Jerry Jofen. And Jerry was a son of a rabbi, son of a rabbi, son of a rabbi, rabbi of the scholastic school of Judaism in Krakow, and was preserved. The bloodline was preserved by sending them across Russia away from the Nazis, and they came through Shanghai and ended up in Brooklyn, of course, where everyone ends up in Brooklyn. I was born in Brooklyn.
Right.
And some of Brooklyn is in me. Anyway, how I met Jerry, I had gotten a graduate. I graduated with a creative writing degree, which didn't exist, but that's what I decided what it was. And I went out to get a job. So I went to some place called the Journal of the American Waterworks Association.
Okay.
And I went there, and the guy was charmed by me, and he was about to hire me when he looked down and realized I had misspelled Wednesday. I didn't know how to spell then. I still don't know how to spell. And you will see that when you read my work. But on the way home, walking down 3rd Avenue, I saw a place called the K Gallery. And I was kind of interested in it. And I went in and I liked what I saw. I liked the art, and so on, and the whole atmosphere.
Mhm.
And later, I got to know Jerry much better. And the K Gallery was named after Kafka. And when I look at a picture of him on the Google or whatever it is, he looks like Kafka after a hard weekend, dark,
I see.
stuff like that. But the thing about him, he was totally brilliant, magnificent mind, and a tragic person. He was heavily drugged out and everything like that for a whole range of drugs.
Hmm.
But he told me never to shoot drugs, never do those drugs, and so on, right? Because I had a special quality about myself and it should be preserved. I think he was looking at who he could have been or was, or what, In any case, he said to me, I got some psilocybin. I had never smoked marijuana. Totally. Right. I had, however, knew about psychedelics because when I was a youngster, I got a job with a hipster who was a musician. And this guy told me about mescaline and psychedelics. And what he said was the color of every leaf in a tree will be different than every other one. And I read Laws of Perception. 5 years later, Jerry came forth.
Mm-hmm.
The and I have to give credit to Charlie Mack. He was the musician. He took me as a 16-year-old to the city with my parents, and we lived in Great Neck, an upper middle class Jewish neighborhood. And we went. I saw many, many, many people play, and they all knew him, and I became kind of a mascot,
Hmm.
which was quite fun. But to me, people like it was a heart of hip hop, not hip hop, but something else they called it at the time. Anyway, bebop, not hip hop, bebop.
Hip-hop.
And he said we could take the psilocybin, and we took it, and it was amazing. Amazing. The ceilings moved and all kinds of stuff. But the most amazing part of it, in a certain sense of the word, was we decided to go to Manhattan while we're tripping, and so we went out and we got a taxi cab. And a taxi cab was, I describe in what I wrote, he was an American of African descent, right? Bald-headed, shining bald head, broad-shouldered, and pulled out from the curb and drove all the way to the Charles Theater on Avenue B in Manhattan without stopping for a light. It was just like we were in a perfect. It was a perfect taxi cab ride. Absolutely thing. Only a thing had only happened when you're on psychedelics and you're quite sensible experience.
Those things, comes all mythical. Yeah.
And next thing you know, I'm looking at movies by Van der Beek and Anger, and Kenneth Anger and a whole bunch of people that I mentioned in there, including the absolutely amazing Harry Smith, who is as magnificent a mind as Jerry Jofen and as damaged a human being. Once, he was completely damaged, but he was unbelievable, right? And and he did Cat's Cradle. He was a master of Ukrainian Easter egg, and Indian and American Indian issues and stuff like that. And he was fantastic, right? And so we went on this trip, and these films I saw while tripping were like nothing I had ever seen, and probably weren't that good, but I was really receptive, And subsequently, Jerry took me to the country, and we took mescaline, and I had several really incredible experiences. And I'll start with one. I walked under a weeping beech tree. It's like a big tree with lots of leaves. It's not like a willow tree. It's covered with leaves. And I'm standing under there, and I begin to feel this warmth and wetness, and all of this is happening. And then I start becoming aware of this incredible electric energy. Right? And it's building and building and building. And I'm standing under the thing, getting into this incredible energy field. And then I open my eyes and realize I'm covered with baby flies.
Oh, no.
The whole, the whole place is full of probably 1 million baby flies. I realized, get out of here. And I left. And they didn't follow me out because I had come into this place, which I think was capital city of baby flies, Bolster County, where I was, just or wherever it was that I was. And that was just part of the thing, and that I experienced music, Sufi, call and response music and other things that were put out by the UN and Laotian music. And I understood it was about a boat ride down a river. And I looked down and I find they're singing in Laotian. I look down and it says on the big river down there, the Metcow or whatever it's called, the Mikau or something. Incredible transformational experience. Capped at the moment when she took out marijuana and smoked it, and I was shocked because that was a drug.
All right.
I had never smoked such a thing as marijuana. I was immediately
Yeah,
brought in.
you kind of started at the top end and worked out to marijuana. But let me ask you, you talked about your previous experience with psilocybin, one of your initial uh,
Right.
psychedelic experiences. How in the world did you get psilocybin in 1965? It wasn't exactly common at that
There
time.
was only one place to get it from, and that was through Harvard. And somehow this Jerry, he was a he was a person who was well known, as being something special. And I can only suspect that it came that way through Jerry. And there was other people I knew, a man named Gerd Stern, who I met later. And Gerd was a teacher at Harvard, and he was later had this thing called USCO, and they did multimedia,
Right.
such overload. So it could have come in, but there it was.
Was it mushrooms or a pill? Or
Hill.
a
It was
pill? So somebody had some high level connections there, apparently, maybe to Harvard. That would have been about the only place you could have found psilocybin, at that time in that place. But anyway, I was just curious about that. Uh, so when was the first time you encountered Timothy Leary? What was the circumstances of that?
Well, I
Uh,
know you read what I wrote, so you're going to take advantage of it. What I did after I had lots of different psychedelic experiences. I had never actually had LSD,
mhm.
and I got it. It was on a sugar cube with a little brown spot, but it certainly was a really good experience. And I had quite a few interesting experiences before that. And uh, I came off it feeling there had to be such a thing as that. It was such an extraordinary experience and so clear, and which I really liked acid. I liked acid quite a lot, especially when it was from Switzerland or someplace like that.
Right, right. There's a lot
And,
to like about it. Yeah.
uh, and I ended up meeting Owsley. I met, when I was hanging out with the dead, and I met Owsley, and I met Nicky Sands, who mainly made a lot of DMT, which I go back to in a minute. But so I called up and and I told them what I wanted to do, and they said, "Well, come on up," and I came up and I was there on time. I was always timely, and I am a member of To the Manor Born, but I'm very timely, like that kind of thing, apparently. And I get there and I say, where's Dr. Leary? Refer to him as Dr. Leary. And they pointed up in the air and they said, he's up in the tree. Like 25 years old, I was an acrobat and a dancer. Climbing a tree for me was as natural as
Right, right.
up a tree.
Appropriate place to meet him, up in the air.
Right up in the air in one of these, not a pine tree, but a kind of tree with leaves that loses its leaves.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is, I go up there and we're sitting like in a place up in the tree where two people can hang out. We talk for 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And I said what I wanted to do was just psychedelic art gallery and find people on psychedelic art. Since I'd come up here to talk to you because I'm sure you might know some people. He says, I do, and I'll help you. And they did, and they were very helpful. and it led to the opening of the Coda Gallery, which didn't last very long, partly because my funding ran out, and it ran out. And when it ran out thoroughly. And my father made shoe polish.
He did what?
He made shoe polish.
Oh, okay.
He had a very popular brand of shoe polish he and my uncle owned.
Okay.
And he's a Jewish businessman, born of Romanian Jewish parents, the first of his siblings born in America. And I told him what it was and what I was doing. And he said, the kind of knowledge that you're involved with has always existed, but it's for very few people. And it's kind of like almost a secret knowledge like that. That's a very dangerous thing you're doing, but because it could draw energies. And so what the hell? And it did do all of that, good energies, and sometimes things that, I found myself in difficult situations and I walked through them like weren't really existing. So that's how I met Tim. And then I went into business with a guy I was introduced by, a psychotherapist named Arthur Eaton, who was he was a very radical man, not communist radical. He was as a psychologist, right? And I basically turned him onto acid. And, he turned me on to this guy who was my partner. It was 1965.
Uh-huh.
And my partner in the thing was a black guy. So, because my attitude was getting the vote's important, but being in business really is important. The capitalist family, don't just be political, and also. And someone asked me if my father was political. And I said, not political, I'd say, but he likes politicians.
I see.
In other words, if he could meet up with a politician that would get something done, right?
Right.
Right, get a commission or whatever. He likes politicians and baseball. I spent a lot of time as a kid in Ebbets Field and a box between home and first, and I met Jackie Robinson, I met Joe Hodges, and it was unreal. And the thing was so funny because when we drove up to Ebbets Field, the home of the Dodgers, the true Dodgers, the Brooklyn Dodgers, before Walter got rid of them, and traded them to L.A.
So
The cop would come up with a gold badge, and my father would give him the car keys. I thought police existed in order to give me.
I see. You were taught to distrust the police.
No, I was to trust them.
To trust?
Yeah, they park the car for you. I've never distrusted police. I just was very straightforward. I always said, I done things that were illegal, but I've never committed any crimes.
Right, right, right. Yes, they were not even illegal at that in those days.
Uh, But even later, like, stepping on cocaine with an adulterant, now that's a crime. That's,
Right.
they would laugh and they'd leave me alone because, I
Did
never did anything naughty.
did you encounter Owsley? You say you got the psilocybin through Owsley initially, or
No, I don't think the psilocybin came through some unknown source, and it was only when I went out to California, then I meet Owsley, and turned out that Owsley's mate lives on the same street, lived on the same street just on the borderline of Woodstock. This woman
no
and a
kidding.
song, huh?
That's interesting. That's convenient.
Right, and across the street was a woman named Susan Weed, who's a well-known, notorious herbalist.
Yes,
Quite,
I I know
intense.
her. Yes.
And she's very intense. My wife has studied with her, and I've known her since then. And they had the psychedelic attention and right in New York, and I had the psychedelic gallery. And then and then here's Ronnie Stanley, Owsley Stanley. Strangely, how could we all live within like a half a mile of each other on the same road? Well, I don't ask questions. It just happened, but it was interesting, you know.
I-
But between LSD and that, I had quite a few encounters. All right. And I wrote them down for my remembrances, but that's too complicated. I also knew um, Lotsof.
Lotsof, yes. Tell me about
Yes.
that. Well, when did you meet Lotsof? He's another iconic character with an interesting life. So, what was your
I
experience
met him.
with Lotsof?
I met him and got mescaline hydrochloride, white mescaline from him about 1963 and 4, and we were doing really good, and I had a wonderful time with it, And he had Howard had lots of labs, and the feds showed up and said, "Where's all the cats and dogs and rabbits and about mice?" You're living in an apartment on 11th Street, you know. And I think they began to suspect that he was up to something that might not be straightforward, but he was, you could buy a jar of mescaline for like $100,
Right.
but a jar of it, right? Well, Howard came across a thing called Ibogaine. And subsequently, when he ran away to Holland and opened a clinic. But when he first got it, he and I looked at it, looked like mescaline. It's the chemical patterns similar to mescaline.
Right.
And, and we decided that we would try it. And to the best of my recollection, we both took around 500 milligrams.
You both took you,
We
you
each, right, took 500 milligrams.
500 milligrams of pure ibogaine.
Yeah.
That should have been a sufficient dose. Yeah.
Yes. It was hyper sufficient. But the thing about it was, I would say that I could I could claim with Howard to be the first two guys in North America that ever took Ibogaine, and the experience was absolutely spectacular because we had taken it in someone else's house, and we were sitting on a couch. At a certain point, I stood up and I said, "I don't. Nothing is happening, Howard." And when that happened, my astral body went up through my body, and then another astral body went up, and another one, and I ended up with my head on the ceiling, looking down at everyone in the room. This was not a hallucination. This was really happening.
Right.
So we decided we'd better go back a couple of blocks away across Avenue A, because this was A and B across Avenue A, and we did. But getting there was an adventure because when we came to the avenue, we could not agree. No, first what happened was another hallucination was I reached for the doorknob, shining gold doorknob, and there was no doorknob there. It was on the other side, and it was an old brass one.
Only when that happens. Right. Yeah.
That kind of like, wow, that's kind of a thing that could be a problem. Well, I was still conscious, but it was like, and so we get to Avenue A, and uh, we cannot agree on what we're seeing because things are really very odd. And finally, a woman with a baby carriage came, and we followed her because we agreed we saw that. And we got to the other side safely and got to his apartment. And when we got there, we went in, and there was an extra bedroom and had a bed in it. It had a window. It had a Venetian blind, with those little blinds that they. And I sat down on the bed, And when I sat down on the bed, what happened was I sunk into the bed and I fell back. Don't know if the blinds started going out of sync
Right.
like this, and I fell back into the bed. When I fell into the bed, I fell like through my head down into my body, and there I was. I was inside my body. Subsequently, on psychedelics like DMT and acid or them combined, I also had in-body experiences. Out of body, yes, but in-body experience.
So Ibogaine gave you the in-body experience. That's
Right. It started that, and I consider that my advanced age. I'm 86 now.
when you took Ibogaine with Lotsof. That was the first time that he had taken
And
Ibogaine. That's when he
know,
understood. That's when
you
he
know,
turned his heroin addiction on that occasion.
he might have. I didn't know if he had heroin addiction, but that it seems to be what I've heard. You
Right.
know,
And he tells the story that he was experimenting with Ibogaine. He was experimenting with anything he could get his hands on, but he was a serious junkie. And when he took Ibogaine, then the next morning he woke up and he had no wish to take heroin. Uh,
no, he
that-
or I began again.
on the JAGs that it was a treatment for opiate addiction, which it turns out it is.
Yeah,
So that was a momentous occasion that you guys took it together.
yeah. And it was funny because many years later, one of my sons went to a talk by him shortly before he passed away. And he described a specific experience with the whole experience, right? And and my son walked up to him and said, "My father told me about that. His name is Isaac Abrams. Is he still alive?" And my son, and then went off somewhere, and I found out that he had died shortly thereafter. But I know he was, like there were a lot of people around who took drugs. I never took drugs. I just took psychedelics, except for a little time that I was involved with cocaine.
Well,
And that's something I told my children, don't really get involved with it very heavily because it makes you feel smart.
makes you feel smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Problem is, really smart people often feel dumb because they realize that they misunderstood a situation or something. But really stupid people don't feel stupid. And cocaine makes them feel smart and powerful. And they end up, and I saw guys go through Lehman Brothers down a ladder into obscurity of the market, And I frankly had a little bit of time with it and enjoyed it. But when it came time to stop, I stopped. I just stopped because a friend, the person who had been
It's a decision. I mean, I've never been addicted to cocaine, but, I can see where a person might get habituated, but you can make the choice as you did, just to stop. I mean,
it
it
was
really
it's
is
not
you the way
It's not addictive like tobacco.
right, it's not like tobacco. It's completely different.
Tobacco is
Yeah,
much more difficult.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
So
I wrote a thing about hours and mace, but I find it. I wrote all these things on paper, but now I called it the disintegrated magician. And it was about being attacked by masons, not masons, like guys with the hats on, but well, maybe I won't find it, but it was really funny. And the thing was, masons spontaneously disintegrate, and so it was all about becoming attacked by masons and escaping from that, by riding on a jade. porpoise or something.
Right.
You know what it was like, but quadrillions of enormous mesons or a subatomic particle, but it's your turn. Oh, but see, that's the thing that was one thing I tell young people about heroin. I was a friend of mine who was he was a notorious criminal attorney, and he was also a great pool player and an incredible cocaine user. So calls me up in San Francisco and says, I have something for you. And I come, and what the something has for me is a beautiful woman who is a sex worker. And there's this stuff on the table, right? And I thought it was coke, and I took a snort of it. That's funny, coke. He said, not coke, it's heroin. And it went,
Okay.
and here I am. So now here I am with this tall blonde. To just say it, and these words, I couldn't get it up, I couldn't get it down, and I couldn't get it off.
I see.
And I decided never again, because it was against my rules. If something like you did something that they cut you off from your feeling body and your sexual body and all that kind of stuff, and your sleep and your dreams,
Right.
then it's and gives you constipation. I don't think it's very good to do.
That was your only encounter with heroin? You didn't.
Well, I took it once and it was boring and nothing. And the
Right.
second time was that, and that was enough. And people say, well, psychedelics are drugs. I say, don't say that. Your psychedelics are an entirely different thing. When I had met the musician and I read Doors of Perception, and then when the word came that I could get the psychedelics, I was ready and willing. And I was going to do it. My wife said to me, if you're going to go and take a trip somewhere, I'm going with you. And we did. And I did a painting which somewhere in the world called I Can Richie Take a Trip. And we took a trip, we got married before any of us did anything like chemicals. And we were in England. We got married on the day that the Russians started the Berlin Wall. And 5 days later, we were in Berlin on our honeymoon. This was the honeymoon, watching Russian tanks and American tanks 200 yards from each other, like with the guns going, this and that. Going, oh, gee, here we are. We just got married and we're going to see the beginning of the Third World War, which didn't happen, incidentally. But it was a remarkable experience, driving all the way to Berlin from Cambridge, and so on. It's that kind of thing, But I think some of the experiences I've had with psychedelics it's like going in your own body. I think have helped me health-wise. I knew I once had my carrot, but carotid arteries, and I heard them like that. And I said to the person administering it, to see it, I said, I have heard that before. I said, what, really? I said, yeah, I was high on acid and I heard that. I could hear that in my body. I could hear the things happening in my body. It was like swimming inside my body, and it was a very distinct experience, and between that and the appreciation of nature and that taking nature, experiencing the significance of nature, and really, and that was what Albert Hoffman said. He said, it isn't religion, there's it's to reacquaint ourselves with the natural world, which it did for me, and very much so. I can still, the natural world is cities too. They
Right.
naturally exist. But sometimes, I go out
you and many people, that's one of the insights that psychedelics give people is a realignment with nature and perhaps a realization of how estranged we become from nature over time. So in some ways, I think psychedelics are evolutionary catalysts to bring us back in alignment with nature. But that's just me. That's just my
I
I
like
I
put it
I have
very
a
well
question
as
for you though about a specific drug. When was the first time that you encountered DMT, and what were your impressions of that?
it was a house that was owned that we used to call the guy Henry Allstate because we were in good hands with Henry. And Nick Sands, who's now gone, was the guy who made the DMT.
Right. Okay.
And
They
uh,
it's coming up everywhere. Right.
found out it comes out of the natural sources, like that. And it's the underlying chemical linked with something else in this the one down South America. And like it was, I loved DMT. And then you couldn't get it, because the thing was that when they made acid illegal, suddenly the same base that you could make $25 worth of DMT, right? You could sell it for $25, I guess, that much of it you could make that much LSD that you could sell for $200,000 or something.
Yeah, as a business model, DMT is not so good, but certainly in terms
Well,
of as a business model, I mean, you can get, out of a gram of DMT, you could get at most a few dozen doses. It doesn't make sense. LSD is much, but there's nothing in the psychedelic world that's quite like DMT. I'm reading this very interesting book by Andy Gallimore. I don't know if you know his work, but he's focused on DMT as an alien, uh, something or other, portal to other dimensions. He's got a book called Death by Astonishment, and it refers to something my brother said about DMT. Someone at one of his seminars asked him, can you die from taking DMT? And he said, only if you can die from astonishment. And it's sort of
went up my nose.
yeah.
It's so funny.
So DMT is was it a big influence on you?
It was because it was what I was using for what I was doing. And sometimes I had read Tolkien, probably something like that. I did DMT and I became the Dark Lord, like that. And sometimes it was pure light and like that. And I remembered um, turning on a guy from some publication. Well, what does this stuff do? And I was up at another place. This was not a little place in Brooklyn with black walls, and it was a different end of the spectrum of, this was on 10th or 11th Street, and it was like the top. There was a garden in it and everything. And I turned this guy on to the MPMT. Well, oh my God. And he ended up, getting involved in. And then I also turned on a guy who was one of the designers of the book Psychedelic Art.
Ah, okay.
And I had painted a painting. Now, after I was done with the Coda Gallery and I'd gone through peyote, I drank 825, double O capsules of ground up peyote. I learned how to drink peyote tea
Mhm.
really fast. And I told people, don't sip on it because it's quite bitter. And people would go,
No, you just have to bolt it out.
You had to bolt it down just to, hold it fast. And then you realize how bad it tasted, but it's too late, and then also when I took capsules, sometimes I would take, those air sickness pills so I wouldn't throw up. Well, it would work for like 2 to 3 hours, and then I'd throw up, and I was pretty high, but when I threw up, I really got high.
Right,
Right.
right.
And
Yeah.
so I went through all that kind of stuff, and DMT, and, a couple of times I had, PCP,
Oh,
but
okay.
that you die from. That you die from. That's that's bad. I broke a tooth on it from grinding, like
Really. Uh,
yeah.
I've never tweeted it, but I have no desire to really.
Well, it's not a psychedelic, it's a psychic, and what it does is it removes your psychic power, the boundaries of your psyche to all kinds of crazy stuff. And people would say, "Well, there's a lot of crazy people in New York." I said, "No kidding, there's 7,000,000. Even if it's 1%, it's
Yeah.
enough to shade the same." So I think your instinct of not, using it was a very good one.
I
Yeah.
was, I was never reckless. I was always curious, but I was very careful about my approach to these things. Uh, I wonder if back in the day, in the early '60s, was there ever any ayahuasca around? Did you ever have a chance to take ayahuasca in those days?
Yes,
Or
there was something they used to use a different name for it.
what's that?
That was a vine, South American vine,
Right, right.
and so I think it was around, and, you had to go to the jungle to get it, and I think Burroughs wrote about it, so,
Exactly. Burroughs, and because of Burroughs, there was some around, Ginsberg also, because Burroughs went to South America, wrote this amazing book called The Yahe Letters.
yeah.
And, there's a whole backstory about Burroughs and Schultes. Burroughs was actually the one that gave Schultes the clue that it was an admixture plant that was most important to ayahuasca's pharmacology because it was the admixture plant that contained the DMT, the visionary component. If you
Mhm.
made the tea from the vine without the admixture, it was slightly mildly psychoactive, but hardly psychedelic. And
Right.
those Burroughs observations that led Schultes to look into these admixture. Did you ever encounter Schultes? Did you ever meet Schultes?
What's his full name?
Richard Schultes, he was a
I
director
never I
of
never
the
met
Medical
him,
Museum at Harvard.
and now I
This
remember
was
it.
a very iconic figure, and he was an ethnobotanist, spent years in the Amazon tracking down all these psychoactive plants, of which ayahuasca was one of his main focuses. I just wondered if you might have run into him or different circumstances, although you were in New York mostly. He was, of course, in Boston when he wasn't in the Amazon. But
Well, I think next year I'm going with,
but he knew many of the
um,
people, that you knew, Leary and Ginsberg and so forth.
Herbert Huncke. Does that name familiar? Huncke? Herbert Huncke?
No, I don't. It's
He's the guy who turned the Burroughs onto junk.
oh
He
no.
met these people at Jerry's place that were like, just, it was like kind of a crossroads and I was a relatively innocent person and, working for, a, a company that had, you know, alarm clocks or something, alarms and all. But that I should ask you if you'd like to ask me about art, my art. I think that would be good.
Yes.
Behind is some of my art. And this, by the way, is called, you know, Caravaggio's Ghost. But you see over there, one side is all the brushes hanging next to me. Like a lot of intellectuals are doing it in front of bookcases. Well, I do it in front of.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you have brushes and paintings. So your art, talk about your art. I mean, was it obviously must have been greatly influenced by your different psychedelic experiences.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, I mean, maybe I'm stepping across the line here because I'm certainly no art critic, but it's not typically psychedelic art as you think of it these days. But it was one of the earliest forms of psychedelic art. So talk about how psychedelics and art came together in your life.
Someone came, he smoked DMT with me, and I told him, and he got some acid to take it. And he sat down with a century plant,
Mhm.
and they don't bloom. They bloom not once 100 years, but pretty infrequently. And while he was tripping, the plant bloomed, which to me is pretty typical of psychedelics. And the guy went and did that. And so I became temporarily the father of psychedelic art. But then I look at a lot of stuff that people call psychedelic art. I have disowned them. They're not psychedelic art. It's something that people call psychedelic art, And I thought a lot about this when I was going to talk to you, or we're going to talk to each other. And I'm kind of the uncle of people like psychedelic artists, or close to it. Ernst Fuchs took psychedelics, but not LSD. He took peyote. He was in New York, did that kind of stuff. Peyote and stuff. Ernst Fuchs. That was quite a bit of time before. Now let me lose the thread of that. What I thought about being a psychedelic artist was, what if you acquaint yourself with my work, is it's not a brand. It's not one thing
Right.
that they do the same thing over and over. And the gallery says, good, I can keep doing these and I can sell these. And like that. I walk in and they always say, your work is incredible, but I don't know how to sell this because you do 2 of one and you do 3 of them. You do 29 drawings in a month and a half called the drawings are called Welcome to the Enchanted Forest, and they're white on black. And then I've gone on to create color things about them and so on, but I'm just too damn irregular, but I'm a psychedelic artist because I have multiple personalities that were created
Right.
and I always say about, the difference between psychosis and psychedelic is people say it's a psychotropic thing, meaning it makes you crazy. No, it doesn't make me a schizophrenic. Schizophrenic, loosely speaking, is multiple personalities at war with each other.
Mhm.
Psychedelic, is being multiple personalities that work and play well together.
Right. Well,
And I really do feel that way, this kind of thing.
psychedelic is such a slippery term. It means whatever you want it to mean. It means mind manifesting, literally. So any kind of artistic expression in some ways is psychedelic, but there's a certain, genre associated or style. But
Yeah.
as your work illustrates, there's a great sort of spectrum of what can be considered psychedelic art,
Yeah.
you know. So you were a pioneer of all this, back in the day because psychedelics were just beginning to diffuse into the culture. They were not so well known before that. But
Yeah. But I would say more about my paintings. The biological groups of them, gardens, all kinds of things, and we'd be happy to help you see some of the things I do, because there is such a variety of things. I've done whole uh, periods when I did the dots, pure dots, energy paintings like this, and then I did so many different kinds of things, and they go, there they are. And then I go on to something else and on to something else. It's intense. And right now I'm combining, um, I've done some pieces that are like a combination, of, they're a combination of dot painting, but something else. So I did all these white paintings, white on black, and then I started to color in some of them. And then they just started to flower, explode in another direction. And some of them are really, and then like this one behind me, which is called, the, can you see it?
yes,
Yes, it's like an homage to Caravaggio or something like that, famous Italian painter, beautiful blacks. And so I've done this piece. I love this piece. It has depth and explosions of energy, It's like kind of psychedelic in the sense that it reminds me of floating from my glial mind, my glial brain, and coming upon neuronic, not neurotic, but neuronic, events with sending waves of energy through the glial things. I think we know a lot through experience, but we don't know a lot through explanation. Somehow, maybe I'm wrong, but it's a pleasure. So tell me more. I would like to share my art with you. That'd be an important thing for me.
well, we appreciate the chance to learn about it. We've put links on our podcast website to some of your different galleries so people can examine that, and some of the stories that you shared today. They're all up there, so people could come back and listen to the recording.
Look, I have a nice. Excuse me, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. What were you about to say? I was just
I'd like you to put the link to a website, which is divided into the 60s, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and you can see the progression or going, different ways and things like that.
yes, we have links to all these different periods. That'll be up on a podcast site, so people could look at that and appreciate the evolution of your art. Uh, you've lived a very long and interesting life, Isaac. I thank you for sharing some of it with me, with us and our audience. We're looking forward to posting this
Oh,
and really appreciate your time.
thank you.